You guys ever heard about the fire spray? Either have I. Stay tuned. Hey Star Wars fans, welcome back to another video from All Things Star Wars Considered. As always, I'm your host Doug, and today, as promised, I am going to touch upon some modern Hasbro stuff, more specifically, the vintage collection. Yes, today we are going to talk about Boba Fett's Slave One. I actually spotlighted the Slave One Kenner version for my 50th episode back last year, and I felt that it was definitely in order to touch upon the modern counterpart. So today we're going to talk about the vintage collection Slave One. And you notice I said Slave One. There is no fire spray in this collection room. Along the way, Hasbro, kind of turned tail and decided to rename it the fire spray. Well, you know what? It's the Slave One. Always has been, always will be. So today we're going to touch upon the vintage collection Slave One, and that unboxing and review is all coming up next. Okay, and let's get into this. Okay, so now here you have the Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett Slave One. Now this is the last Slave One they put out before they changed the name to Boba Fett's Spaceship or Fire Spray or whatever they ended up calling it. So this is the last version of the Slave One which hit the markets. Obviously you can see it's a pretty massive ship. I always love the vintage collection attention to detail. You got the Empire Strikes Back logo with the single racetrack piping around the outer edge of the box. Boba Fett Slave One, figures not included, and includes display stand. So yeah, a pretty neat looking ship. We got a bunch of stuff along the bottom here, which is just about a billion different languages. This says figures not included, and this says figures not included. So that's all really we can say about the front of the box. Okay, now we're taking a look at the top of the box. Obviously, we have the Empire Strikes Back logo, Boba Fett Slave One. Nice that they put the little Kenner logo there. That's pretty cool. Shows the ship on the display stand, which is included in this version. Shows a Boba Fett, that's VC09 in the cockpit. And then it shows you one of the features. Includes Han Solo in carbonite. And this one actually slides into a compartment in the front of the ship. Obviously, you remember the vintage one from Kenner back in 1981. Actually, he went into the cargo area. So, oh boy, I just realized I had a big glare on this. Hopefully that didn't mess up this. If so, we'll just reshoot it again. What's 46 seconds of my life? No big deal. Now let's get to the end panels and the bottom of the box. Okay, and here's the bottom of the box. The wild thing about this is they don't really have any explanation. They just show pictures. Like Kenner, it would say, turn lever and wings, deploy for flight mode or something like that. This is showing that you push this little button over here and it deploys a missile. So we have gotten a little bit more from this than we did the Kenner version back in the day, because obviously the Kenner version really didn't have much to offer. Nothing, no lights, no sounds, no firing missiles, nothing. So this, you're at least getting something. So let's look at the end panels. Okay, and here's the end panel. And again, it's a different image, and I like the fact that they have a different image, but it just shows Boba in the actual cargo area with a stormtrooper kind of on guard, and it's just showing the entire cargo area opened up, because you have this little hinge. There's this little compartment here. We'll get into that when we actually review the ship, but it's nice that they've actually taken a bunch of images and put them on all four parts of the box. So let's get to the other end panel, and yes, before you ask, that is a different image as well. Okay, now here's the last image. This is on the other end of the box. Now this one shows the underside of the ship. In all the Kenner stuff, they would actually put like a script here, right where my finger is, and it would say, you know, push button and bomb drops. But instead, they've kind of chosen to just kind of show you. They're not telling you what to do. They're just showing you, you push this little button on this part of the ship, and it will drop this bomb. So that's kind of cool. We will get into that when we actually review and display the toy. So I think we've spent enough time on the box. Without further ado, let's get into the review and unboxing of the Slave One. Stick around for that. Okay, now I'm just kind of winging this here, because, you know, with every review you have challenges that maybe the prior review didn't, you know, pose for you. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to figure this out on the go. But even though you would think that it's not the most important part of the ship, Hasbro certainly put a lot of effort and a lot of detail into the bottom of the ship. Initially I was thinking, well, why bother? You know, it is the bottom of the ship. But when you really stop to think about it, you do see the Slave One in this angle quite a bit, because it kind of flies in that position, you know. So once it's in the air, you have these flaps here, and you know how those flaps work. So this is kind of neat. You know, this is kind of like a flight mode, and there is some nice detail in that. And we'll get into that a little bit further later on. But we have some engines here, and there's some nice weathering in there. It's all weathered. There's like a really nice little wash over this whole bottom part of the ship, you know. There's a lot of detail, and I think what they've done is, because this is already, I think, the second version. I think there's 3 total versions. Could be 4, I'm not quite sure. But I think there was like kind of like a cartoonish one that came out initially. Then I think they came out with another version. Then they came out with this version, and I believe they also have a version for Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian or whatever the actual tagline is on the box. But this has been out several times. But by the time they hit this version right here, they've already kind of said, well, you know, we've already done all the work, so now let's do the washes. Let's do the weathering to make this thing look like it's kind of seen a lot of action. So there's not a lot to the bottom of it as far as feature-wise. I mean, there's great detail. But the thing I mentioned when I was talking about the pictures on the box is these bombs. Now, these bombs, there's little buttons on the side. Let me see if I can kind of find them. And it's right here. So you push this button, and then it releases. I don't know if you can see these little clips here. And when you do that, they drop. Of course, it's upright, so it's not going to drop. But here you go. And you just push those buttons, and then this releases. So you got these 2 little pins that kind of hold the bombs in place, and when you release them, you can see the bombs drop. So a lot of detail even on the bombs. So very well done, and I think we've covered the bottom well enough, and I think it's time to move on. Now you're probably saying, where'd the ship go? Well, I just wanted to briefly kind of show you what comes with this. This is the stand. This is how I had that sitting there. So you put that like that, and then the ship kind of locks in place. It's got this neat little Bantha skull. Whoop, I'm just trying to get that in there without kind of knocking it. So you have the Bantha skull logo on the bottom of the thing. It's clear, it's solid, and the ship kind of locks right into place in there. It's a nice little added bonus that came with the ship, and it's just great for displaying. So that's your stand. Okay, now let's get into the meat and potatoes. This is what you all want to see. The hull, the most visible part of the ship. This awkward looking street lamp type of thing. And, you know, the design of this ship made it very difficult for Hasbro, made it very difficult for Kenner to really fully realize the potential of this ship. Now, I don't think that because of the design, there's a lot of options for either Kenner or Hasbro to do a lot with this, but I think what Hasbro has done, based on what they had to work with, is pretty remarkable. So they pretty much tried to utilize every nook and cranny of this ship. So let's get into it. Okay, now if you recall when I did the Kenner review on the Kenner Slave one, these cannons worked in unison with each other. You couldn't move this one without this one moving in the exact same direction. They were attached. They worked, like I said, in unison. These are individual, so they operate individually from each other. So you could have this one firing this way, you could have this one firing that way. And if you also recall, I said that they didn't do anything except just made a clicking sound. These actually fire missiles. There's nothing electronic. Like I know when I did the missile deployment on the Millennium Falcon, they actually made sounds when they deployed. These don't do anything, but you just hit this little button on the end and they fire. Same thing with this one. So pretty neat. And I've got my little area here so I didn't lose them. So yeah, that's a pretty cool little feature for this ship. Okay, now I'm trying to get very in-depth. I wanted to show you the feature of the seismic bomb drop. So we have this button here, and when you push that button, there's a little clip that holds the bomb in place on the underside of the ship, and that releases it and allows the bomb to drop. So let's see how that works. So as you can see, the little seismic charge has been deployed. So a nice, neat little feature for the ship. So you know what we got to do now? Let's get into the cargo area of the ship. So stick around for that. Okay, now it's been tricky. I've had to shoot this a couple of times because once you lift this, right, you lose the lighting because it creates like this shed, so you can't get any lighting in there. So I had to get a little creative. So you have this little notch right there, and then that pops, and then you can kind of lift this up, and there's your cargo area. Now, not anything over the top. It's small, but there's some details, a couple of decals in there, which I guess add to the ambiance of the ship. But as you can see, there's not a lot of room in there. And they utilized this space right here, and we'll show you that next. But there's a couple of foot pegs in there, and obviously you got the cockpit area back in here. There's not much there, but we'll get into each area, each nook and cranny of this ship. So I'm trying to do the best I can to show you what the cargo area of this ship looks like. So it's not perfect, but at least I was able to light it up a little bit better, because when I shot it the first time, it looked like a closet. So yeah, let's get into the next couple of features of this ship. Okay, and here's the rear of the ship. Now, to pay homage to Kenner's original Slave 1 from '81, they have this rear loading ramp here, and it kind of pops up and slides out. But it's more for aesthetics. Like on the box, you can actually see a Bespin guard trying to load the carbonite block in there, and it's too narrow. There's no way you could even load him in there. And there's nothing to it. There's no access to the ship from here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's really no way for you to even access the ship through there. So it's just more for aesthetics and just for looks. So we can just kind of slide that back into place. Now, like I said earlier, they tried to use every nook and cranny of the ship. And they have this little area here. And when you pop this down, you have this little storage container. Now, I guess you could use it as an escape pod if you wanted. There's nothing on it that has any type of engines or thrusters or anything that would even indicate that it could sustain flight. But, you know, it's got this little thing. You could actually kind of put an action figure in there, and I have a Luke figure handy. So you could kind of put Luke in there. Well, if you tried to put Luke in there, maybe. But you know, you could pop him in there, and maybe he's in hibernation, and you can just kind of slide this in there, and then that goes back into place. So that's kind of neat. You know, like I said, they're trying to utilize every square inch of the ship. So kudos to Hasbro. A for effort. Okay, last and certainly not least is the front end and more importantly, the cockpit of this ship. Now, initially, I kind of shot this video and I did it all in one shot, and it was a mess. So I had to kind of start cutting and splicing and reshooting. So I think this will be the best way to do this comprehensively. Now, I'm not going to go crazy with these wings. It kind of pays homage to the original Slave One, and it's not so much paying homage because it's actually what the wings did. They did kind of pivot, you know, for flight mode. These don't necessarily lock into place. I've messed around with it. I've actually done some research, and they kind of lock this way, and then when you put them up this way, they don't really lock. They kind of fall back into this position. But you know, there's good detail there. It's just I don't know if it's completely executed correctly. Now, how are you going to get Boba Fett into the cockpit? Well, you have this hinged area, and again, this is like the original Slave One from '81, but instead of just the glass, the entire front end of the ship pops up. So we're going to move this whole thing up, and it's on a hinge, and look, here's your carbonite block. So carbonite hand actually goes into the front of the ship, not the rear of the ship. We'll get into that in a little bit. Now you have this cargo area right here, and it actually holds 3 figures. You could actually squeeze 2 more figures behind Boba Fett, and I'm going to tell you something. It won't be easy because I struggled to get this in here. And this is VC 186. Of course, I had to remove his jetpack, and it was still very difficult. And again, trying to get lighting in here, almost impossible. I've tried a couple of different ways, and I just couldn't light this thing up properly. So let's, you just can't. I just can't seem to figure out the best way to light this thing. So let's try that. So yeah, you can kind of see it, but there you have it. And the cockpit itself isn't really all that fancy. They didn't do a lot of detailing in the actual view screen that he would be looking into, but it is what it is. So there you have it. So I actually have an idea, and I'm going to try something. And if it works, you'll get to see it here first. If it doesn't work, then I kind of made a fool of myself. So stick around. That's all coming up next. Okay, I apologize for the quick detour, but as I was filming the last segment, something popped into my head, and I wanted to try it. So I was thinking about this carbonite block, and I am not a fan of loading them in the front. I mean, what does it matter? I mean, it's a cargo area, but they said load Captain Solo in the cargo area, and you know, obviously even on the box they showed the Bespin guard loading the carbonite block into the rear of the ship. That's where he went. So I had this idea. So we have this little area here, like I showed you earlier, and it's got this little cargo box. Now let's remove the cargo box, and let's see if the carbonite block actually kind of fits into this little like area here, because that one locks in. And let's see. Oh, it's just a little bit. The carbonite block is just a little bit too big. I mean, it'll still work. You could load them in there, but it doesn't lock into place. So once you do that, it kind of drops out of that little slot. Wait a minute. Before I move on, I do have a carbonite block nearby that came from the Razor Crest. And this is a Rhodian that the Mandalorian actually captured, and it actually hangs inside the Razor Crest. But I believe it's a little bit smaller. So let's see if that actually works. So we're going to slide the Rhodian in there, and oh my God, it fits. And then you could kind of load him in there. Oh, that's added play for this. Oh, I love it. So you could take Solo here, and you could put him in the front, where he belongs. Then you could put this Rhodian in the back, and you could have Boba on like a expanded mission in which he has to kind of secure a couple of bounties. So yeah, and then you could have Solo in the front, the Rhodian in the back. Oh my God, yeah, I love it. So thanks for tuning in and watching the review of this ship. And now, without further ado, we will show this ship in a display bustling with action figures. Yes, you knew that was coming. So when we return, you will see how this thing looks in a display. So stick around for that. Okay, and here's your finished display. Now, obviously, Lando has reneged on his deal with Vader, as according to him, this deal keeps getting worse all the time. Now he has supplied Chewbacca and Princess Leia with weapons, and they run to the Slave One, trying to stop Boba Fett from taking Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. Just as they arrive, this Bespin guard is loading Han Solo into the Slave One as the stormtrooper looks on and supervises. Meanwhile, this stormtrooper, Boba Fett, and this other stormtrooper return fire on our heroes. Vader seems oblivious to the whole thing, as he's obviously pretty displeased with Lobot and this Bespin guard. And as we start to wrap things up, we have a couple of Ugnaughts who seem oblivious to the whole thing as well, because they're just having a discussion while all this blaster fire is being exchanged. So obviously not very screen accurate, but just a lot of fun and just a cool way to display the Slave One amongst a bunch of action figures. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we will see you on the next one. Well, I hope you enjoyed the review and display of the vintage collection Boba Fett spaceship, the Slave One. A nice ship. I mean, they did a great job of what they had to work with. Like I stated at the beginning, it doesn't always translate. I actually said that in my Kenner review as well. It's a cool ship, but when you stop putting it together and trying to make it a toy and something that you can, kind of play with, it kind of falls a little bit flat. I apologize, and it's not Kenner's fault. It's not Hasbro's fault. They did the best they could with what they had to work with. But, kudos to Hasbro for utilizing every square inch of the ship. They created that little storage container that they fit in that rear part of the ship. They had that loading ramp to nothing, the loading ramp to nowhere. The cargo area was a little bit bigger than the Kenner version, but not by much. If it was to scale, you would have probably had a little bit more to work with, but obviously it's impossible for Hasbro, Kenner to create scale ships. It's just not feasible. Maybe someday if they did a HasLab, maybe they could make the Slave One even bigger, and then maybe almost like the Ghost, almost like the barge, the Razor Crest. Those are a little bit more to scale, and you're able to get a little bit more into that cargo area. So we'll see. I don't think that Hasbro will ever do the Slave One as a HasLab, but you never know. So having said that, I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope you enjoyed the display. I have a ball putting those displays together, but it's time to start wrapping things up and moving on. Before we do so, though, I'd like to thank everybody for the continued support of this humble little YouTube channel of mine. Obviously, you guys are the reason why I do what I do. I do want to remind you, though, that if you haven't done so, I ask you to hit the subscribe button so I can continue to bring you that valuable Star Wars content we've all come to know and love. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. That helps the channel as well. If you have a question, a comment, some input, please leave it in the comment section, and I'll get back to each and every one of you. It's my favorite part of the channel. Hasn't changed, and if you leave me a comment, I will get back to you. Might take me a day or so, might take me a little while to craft a response, but I will eventually get back to you. So want to remind everybody to have a great day. Thank everybody for watching, and we will see you on the next video. And as always, may the Force be with you. What exactly is a fire spray anyway?